Hey guys, I'm Larry Casilla. I'm with Capital One Auto Navigator, and today we're going to be talking about the step-by-step process for removing those foggy and faded headlights. To simplify a somewhat confusing topic, we're going to split it into three categories: DIY, prosumer, and professional, to see the difference from before and after and how much time it takes to achieve those results. Step one is to lift the hood to get access to the light. Then step two is to add masking tape around the light to make sure that when you do go in and sand and or polish, you're only polishing the light itself and not the paint around it causing damage. The idea is to saw behind the light so that it protects the paint when you apply the tape. So you want to get as close as possible without actually touching the light itself and protecting the paint at the same time. Next, if there's any gaskets like this one, same concept, you want to just lightly tape that off. Specifically on the paint here, again, reverse it, slide it, and then pop it up like that. And then this one here, slide in with a little saw action. And now the light is exposed and there's no way to do any damage with your sandpaper. There you go. All right, now that everything's taped up, what we're gonna do is split this into three sections. Over here is going to be DIY, right here is prosumer, and the third one is gonna be professional, and we'll see the difference and the time it takes to achieve those results. All right, first thing you wanna do is grab your wool pad and attach it to your power drill, then grab gloves and glasses and go to the headlight. This is called priming the pad. The idea is to get all the liquid on all the fibers. So with your glove on, you massage it in. Pretty much primed, you can see it's still a little wet. You go in and add a couple more squirts. The idea here is once the liquid's in there that we just primed, it's keeping the stuff that we just put on, the liquid we just put on, at the surface. So now we're using this liquid to actually grind away the surface. If I haven't primed or I didn't prime, all that material will get stuck into the wool pad and you won't get as much removal of the oxidation. So it's a little trick that we use to prime first. So the headlights, when they come from the factory, are coated in a UV protection, sort of like suntan lotion. Over time, that degrades or oxidizes. When it's sunburned, I have to remove that. By removing it, we sand or cut that. In step two and step three, we're gonna be using sandpaper to actually remove that or level it. Step one, we're using compound. That compound acts like liquid sandpaper. In step two and step three, we're gonna be using actual sandpaper. And the difference is it just cuts much faster and much smoother and actually introduces less heat into the plastic. So it's actually safer than using a wool pad. We can clean off the pad. You're using medium to heavy pressure because you're trying to get the wool pad to cut the plastic here. Now you can see I'm starting to cut through a lot of the oxidation that was caused from years of sitting outside. Now the difference here is I'm using a wool pad, which is just strings, where when we go to step number two and step number three, we're using sandpaper, which is gonna cut a lot deeper and a lot faster. So you can see this process takes a lot longer and the results are good, but they're not as good as step two and step three. You see it starting to come out. For section two, the prosumer, we use sandpaper. In this case, we used 1,000 and then finished with 3,000 and then used the wool pad. Most people fear using sandpaper. In fact, it is less abrasive and less aggressive on the plastic material. It's actually a much better technique for the prosumer. All right, so the first step, now that we have a little bit of water on both the pad and the light, we're gonna go horizontally, meaning left to right first pattern, and work our way down. Now, when you're doing this, you're gonna see a little slurry. That white slurry, that's the oxidation coming off. See it right there? We're doing kind of like what we did over here in step one, but we're doing it much faster and with less heat introduced to the plastic. Okay, now at this point, you can see the pad has white stuff in it. That's the oxidation. That's basically the sunburn on this. You take your water and you clean out the pad again. And now it's all gone. A few squirts there. wipe it. Now you want it to be a little bit hazy because you just introduced a lot of sandpaper. But you go back in, you can see this area looks pretty good. This one here needs a little bit of extra work. So you're gonna be able to do this a couple of times. Then go back in. Again, we're using side-to-side motions. And the next phase, we're gonna be going the opposite direction, and I'll explain why. You may need to do this 3 or 4, maybe 5 times, depending on how bad the plastic is. Now keep in mind, we're only using 1,000 grit right now, which is pretty strong. But when we go to this, on a professional level, I'll go down to about 500 or 800, depending on the severity of the damage. Okay, there we go. There's the slurry. Clean it off so we have fresh sandpaper. Clean this off. Okay, now we're gonna take this one off. A couple squirts. And now last time I went east to west, now I'm gonna go north-south. The reason we do that is it's called cross-cut or cross-hatch technique. And so by going the opposite direction, I'm also sanding down the peaks of the previous sanding that I did. So it's kind of a neat way to get a much more refined result. Okay. You can already see it's a little bit lighter than it was before. Now for step 3, recoat. Now this has already been primed. Okay, you can already see it's a little bit lighter than it was before. For step 3, what professionals would do, I use 500 grit, then 800 grit, 1,000 or 1,500, and then 3,000 grit. All sandpaper just to refine the imperfections and the scratches, and of course, the UV oxidation on the plastic. Then I finish up with a wool pad and polish, and then a foam pad and polish. Although it seems like multiple steps, it is in fact much easier than going the traditional style of using a wool pad. So the final step, once everything is done, whichever one you choose, we do have to put a coating on there to protect it. Now what I'm looking for is a uniform cut right now. And you can see this is pretty smooth. There's no imperfections like there were over here or no little areas. So it's pretty smooth. The difference now on the second pass is there isn't any brown stuff. That brown stuff, which was the dead skin from burning and burning and burning and sitting for years and oxidizing in the sun, now you can see it's white. So now I'm down past that, sort of like a tooth that has decay in it. You have to get past all the decay, and now I'm into good tooth. That's basically good plastic. So now I know that that is as far as I need to go in respect to sanding it down and going as deep as I need to get underneath the oxidation. Now we're gonna start building back up and refining it. So from 500, we're gonna go to 800 grit. Okay, make sure she's even. Couple sprays, and you'll see it'll start getting lighter and lighter and lighter. We're gonna go to 1,000 or 1,500, whatever you have. So last, I like to finish up with 3,000 grit. You can again do this all by hand as well, but machine is way faster. Now we're gonna go in and we're gonna switch from sandpaper now to a wool pad and then a foam pad to finish out. So this is just like it was before. This is a wool pad, but this is a different type of material. As you can notice, there's not a ton of material coming out of it. So you're gonna take exfoliate polish, which is a cutting compound, like we did before. You're gonna mix it in. And most people right now would take that. You can see that it's sitting on top and mix it all in. And the goal here is to kind of tickle the fibers so that all the compound, all the polish or whatever you're using as the liquid sandpaper is getting into the wool fibers. You want to be able to coat every single fiber. So as it's spinning, it's slapping, and as it's slapping with the material, in this case compound, it's actually restoring the finish in the process. So now that it's primed, then you take one little dot like this, and you're good to go, because now she's all primed. So now we just took out the 3,000 grit marks. Now look at the shine on that. So from the wool pad, which is more aggressive, and we're gonna go to the last step, which is a foam pad. Foam pad has less abrasive. As you can see, foam versus wool. There's lots of fibers that spin, and as they're spinning, they're slapping the material, whether it's paint or in this case, the headlight. This is foam, much softer, so we're gonna refine the marks that were put in by the wool pad. Put it on your machine. Just like we primed the wool pad, you have to prime the foam pad. So you take your hand, rub that in, and you wanna push it into the pores. The reason you wanna do that is as it fills the pores, it makes it so the next step that I do right here, put a little bit, it's not gonna allow it to penetrate the pad. So this material, which is polish, is gonna stay out, and it's gonna be on top of the pad and be able to restore the finish there. So now that that's primed and we have a little dot there, we're gonna go in, repeat the same process. For the very last step, once you're satisfied with whatever step that you've chosen, you now have to put some protection on it. The idea is you're putting suntan lotion on the plastic, so when it goes back outside, it's strong and it can stay protected for long periods of time. To do that, they come in all types of shapes and forms. This particular one is a wipe versus a liquid, but liquid is just as good. You take it out, you make sure that this area has been cleaned. Obviously, we've cleaned it a bunch of times. And then you take your towel and you're going to wipe the coating on. And you can see it really brings back a lot of depth and, in fact, shine into the headlight. But more importantly, you are now protecting it for multiple years from the sun. There you go. And you're gonna let it dry without touching it. Make sure you just leave it alone after a few wipes, and I would do the rest of the headlight. And then once it dries, then you can wash it and put it outside. So you're gonna need to read the directions, of course. Each one is a little bit different, but most of the time you don't wanna have it exposed to sun or water for 24 hours. As you can see, there is a multitude of different ways to restore the headlight, some quick and easy with marginal results, some using sandpaper that get much, much better. But the bottom line is I'm encouraging you to use sandpaper as it's much safer on the glass itself. You're not gonna introduce too much heat, and the results speak for themselves.